The Golden Facade. Everyone in Westlake knew Olivia Jensen and Theodore Theo Mitchell were destined for each other. Their love story had become something of a local legend, the kind that made cynics reconsider their stance on soulmates. Olivia, with her warm chestnut hair and infectious laugh, had caught Theo's attention during their sophomore year of college. He was the quiet engineering student with thoughtful gray eyes who spent hours in the campus library. Their meeting was nothing extraordinary, a spilled coffee, an offered napkin, a shared textbook, but what blossomed afterward certainly was. "They make it look so easy," Olivia's friend Naomi whispered as they watched Theo spin Olivia across the dance floor at their engagement party. 7 years together and they still look at each other like that. Behind the music and celebration, Olivia couldn't help but agree. Their relationship had been remarkably smooth, disagreements resolved with patient conversations, career decisions made with mutual support, and a steadfast commitment that never wavered, despite the 2 years they spent in different cities during graduate school. "What's your secret?" People would often ask them, half joking but genuinely curious. "Communication," Olivia would answer with a smile, while Theo nodded in agreement. But even as she said it, something in Theo's eyes would shift momentarily, a flicker so brief that only someone who knew every expression of his face would notice. Olivia had noticed it several times over the past year, but attributed it to wedding stress or work pressure. After all, they told each other everything. The morning of their wedding arrived with perfect weather, sunshine filtering through scattered clouds, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of the garden roses they'd chosen for the ceremony. Olivia stood before the mirror in her getting-ready suite, her ivory dress catching the light. "You're the most beautiful bride I've ever seen," her mother said, adjusting the delicate veil. "Theo won't know what hit him," added her sister Fiona with a wink. When Olivia walked down the aisle at sunset, the collective intake of breath from their guests was audible. But she only had eyes for Theo, who stood waiting for her, looking handsome in his tailored suit, his eyes glistening with emotion. Their vows were heartfelt and personal. Theo's voice wavered slightly as he promised to share every part of myself with you, completely and honestly for all our days. Olivia noticed that same flicker in his eyes, but it was gone so quickly she convinced herself she'd imagined it. The reception was everything they'd hoped for, intimate yet joyful, with fairy lights strung across the garden venue and their favorite songs playing as friends and family celebrated their union. Photos captured their first dance, the cake cutting, the laughter and tears. From the outside, it all looked perfect. "If anyone deserves this happiness, it's you two," Theo's best friend Julian said during his toast. "I've never seen two people more right for each other." As the night drew to a close, Olivia caught Theo staring at her from across the room with an intensity that made her heart skip. She excused herself from a conversation with her aunt and made her way to him. "What are you thinking about, husband?" she asked, testing the new word on her tongue. He smiled, but there was something hesitant behind it. "Just that I'm the luckiest man alive," he said, taking her hand. "And that I can't wait to begin our life together, truly together." Later, as they said goodbye to the last of their guests and prepared to leave for their honeymoon suite, Olivia felt a strange tension in Theo's shoulders when she embraced him. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Perfect," he replied, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Everything's perfect." Midnight Revelation. The honeymoon suite at the Lakeside Hotel was every bit as romantic as the brochures promised. Panoramic windows overlooking the moonlit water, rose petals scattered across the king-sized bed, and a bottle of champagne chilling in an ice bucket. Olivia kicked off her heels with a contented sigh, her wedding dress rustling as she moved to the balcony. "Can you believe we actually did it?" she called over her shoulder. "We're married, Theo." When he didn't respond, she turned. Theo stood in the center of the room, still in his suit, his tie loosened but his posture rigid. Something in his expression made her heart falter. "Theo?" She crossed the room to him. "What's wrong?" He took her hands in his, leading her to sit on the edge of the bed. His palms were clammy against hers. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Something I should have told you a long time ago. Olivia felt a chill spread through her chest. 1,000 possibilities flashed through her mind. Another woman, financial troubles, second thoughts about their marriage. "You're scaring me," she admitted. Theo closed his eyes briefly, gathering courage. 14 months ago, I started having these episodes, moments where I'd lose coordination or forget simple things. I thought it was stress from the project deadline, but when I dropped a full mug of coffee because my hand just stopped working, I went to see a doctor. He paused, his thumb tracing circles on her wrist. After a lot of tests, they diagnosed me with Wagner's syndrome. It's rare, a degenerative neurological condition that affects the central nervous system. Olivia's mouth went dry. What does that mean exactly? It's unpredictable, Theo continued, his voice steadier now that he'd begun. In some people, it progresses slowly over decades with minimal impact. In others, it can cause significant mobility issues or cognitive decline within a few years. There's no way to know which path it will take for me. Olivia stared at him, trying to process his words. Is it terminal? No, he quickly assured her. But it could eventually affect my ability to walk, to use my hands precisely, to remember things. There are treatments to manage symptoms, but no cure. And you've known this for over a year? Olivia pulled her hands away, standing up. Her wedding dress suddenly felt constrictive. Why didn't you tell me? Theo looked up at her, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen him. At first, I was in denial. Then when we got engaged, I was afraid. Afraid you might stay with me out of obligation, or worse, that you might leave. I convinced myself I was protecting you, giving you the perfect engagement you deserved. His voice cracked. But tonight, watching you become my wife, promising to share everything with you, I couldn't keep lying by omission. He reached for her hand again, but stopped halfway. I understand if this changes things. If you want an annulment, I won't contest it. You deserve a full life, Olivia. Not one burdened by uncertainty and potential caregiving. Olivia felt tears spill onto her cheeks. Emotions churning inside her, shock, anger, fear, and beneath it all, a profound sadness for the pain Theo must have carried alone. An annulment? She repeated, her voice hoarse. Is that what you think I want? I don't know what you want, he admitted. But you deserve to make that choice with all the facts. Olivia turned away, moving back to the balcony. The lake stretched before her, vast and dark except for the reflection of stars. She took several deep breaths, trying to steady herself. I need a moment, she said quietly. Just give me a moment to think. Behind her, she heard Theo's soft, "Of course," followed by the sound of him sinking into the armchair in the corner of the room. The weight of his revelation hung in the air between them, transforming what should have been a night of celebration into one of reckoning. Ripples of truth dawn broke over the lake with gentle persistence, casting soft light through the windows of the honeymoon suite. Olivia sat curled in the armchair, wrapped in the hotel's plush robe, watching Theo's sleeping form on the bed. They had talked until nearly 4 a.m., a raw, honest conversation unlike any they'd had before. She thought back to last Christmas when Theo had dropped and shattered her grandmother's serving dish. At the time, he'd blamed it on being clumsy from exhaustion. Now she understood it had been an episode. She remembered his sudden withdrawal from their weekly tennis matches, his explanation that work was too demanding. The times he'd seemed uncharacteristically forgetful about plans or conversations. All these moments now appeared in a different light. Theo stirred, his eyes finding hers across the room. You didn't sleep, he observed, his voice rough with mourning. I did a little, she lied, offering a small smile. How are you feeling? Lighter, he admitted, sitting up. Terrified about what comes next, but lighter. Olivia moved to sit beside him on the bed. I'm still angry that you kept this from me, she said softly. Not because of the diagnosis, but because you went through it alone when you didn't have to. I know, he nodded. I made the wrong choice for what I thought was the right reason. Tell me about the day you found out, she requested, taking his hand. I want to understand what it was like for you. Theo described, sitting alone in Dr. Westfield's office, how the walls seemed to close in as the neurologist explained the test results, how he'd walked for hours afterward along the river, trying to make sense of a future suddenly filled with question marks. "I had your engagement ring in my desk drawer at home," he revealed. "I'd bought it 2 weeks before. That night, I almost returned it. Why didn't you?" "Because when I got home, you called. You were excited about that promotion you'd been working toward, and you sounded so happy. I realized that even with this diagnosis hanging over me, hearing your voice still made everything better." He looked down at their intertwined fingers. "Selfish, maybe?" "No," Olivia shook her head. "Human." They spent the day in their suite, ordering room service and talking through what Wagner's syndrome might mean for their future. Theo showed her the medical websites on his phone, the support group he'd joined anonymously. They researched specialists together, Olivia taking notes with the same determination she applied to work projects. "What scares you most?" she asked as afternoon faded into evening. Theo was quiet for a long moment. "Becoming a burden. Watching you become a caretaker instead of a wife. And what if I'm scared of not being a good enough caretaker if that happens?" she countered. "Then we're both afraid of letting each other down," he said with a sad smile. "Maybe that's a good place to start, knowing neither of us wants to disappoint the other." As night fell again, they sat on the balcony wrapped in blankets, the remnants of their dinner on the table between them. "We should probably go home tomorrow," Olivia said. "Cancel the Bali trip and use that time to see the specialist you mentioned." Theo looked at her with surprise. "You want to skip our honeymoon?" "This is our honeymoon," she gestured between them. "Maybe not the one we planned, but it's ours. And I think we've done more real honeymooning in these conversations than we would have lying on a beach pretending everything is perfect." For the first time since his confession, Theo laughed, a genuine sound that reminded Olivia of the man she'd fallen in love with years ago. "Only you would consider medical research a romantic activity. Hey, I'm a project manager." "Planning is my love language," she teased, feeling something tight within her chest begin to loosen. They weren't okay yet, but they were finding their way toward a new kind of okay. That night they slept curled together, no longer separated by secrets. And when Theo's hand trembled slightly as he reached to turn off the lamp, Olivia pretended not to notice, not out of denial, but out of an instinctive understanding that there would be time enough for acknowledging such moments. Tonight was for rest. Foundations rebuilt. 6 months into their marriage, Olivia and Theo had developed a new rhythm to their life together. Their apartment now contained a carefully organized medication schedule on the refrigerator, a collection of books on neurological conditions on the bookshelf, and a calendar marked with appointments to various specialists and therapy sessions. "Remind me again why we're doing this?" Theo grumbled as Olivia set up the camera in their living room one Sunday afternoon. "Because Dr. Patterson suggested documenting your mobility baseline," she replied, adjusting the tripod. "And because I want to remember what a terrible dancer you are even before you can blame it on your condition." Theo laughed despite himself. Olivia's ability to approach his diagnosis with practicality rather than pity had become his anchor. She never minimized the seriousness of Wagner's syndrome, but she refused to let it become the center of their existence. The first major test of their reconstructed relationship came unexpectedly on a Tuesday. Olivia received a call from Theo's office. He had experienced an episode during a client presentation and was now in the emergency room as a precaution. By the time she arrived, breathless and terrified, he was sitting up in bed looking embarrassed more than anything else. "False alarm," he told her. "Just lost my balance and knocked over the projector." Made quite the dramatic exit, though. Bet they'll remember our proposal now. But later that night, when they were home and the brave face had fallen away, Theo broke down. "It happened in front of everyone," he said, his voice hollow. 20 people watched me stumble over nothing and forget the numbers I'd memorized. Julian had to finish the presentation. Olivia sat beside him on their couch, not offering empty reassurances. "That sounds humiliating," she acknowledged. "And scary. What if next time it's worse? What if I can't work? What happens to our plans for a house, for children someday?" Olivia took his face in her hands. "Then we adjust the plans. We always knew this could happen, Theo. It doesn't change who we are or what we want, just how we get there." The following weekend, they hosted a small dinner party, their first since the wedding. As Olivia arranged flowers in the dining room, she overheard Theo in the kitchen with Julian. "How's married life treating you?" Julian asked. "Still living the dream?" There was a brief pause before Theo answered. "Not the dream we advertised, but maybe a better one. Turns out Olivia's even more amazing than I thought." "You two still make the rest of us look bad," Julian laughed. "No." Theo's voice was thoughtful. "We're just finally being real." Later, as their friends gathered around the table sharing stories and wine, Olivia watched Theo across the room. He was using his left hand more than usual, a compensation technique the occupational therapist had suggested for days when his right hand trembled. No one else seemed to notice, but she saw the momentary frustration cross his face when he nearly dropped a serving spoon. When their eyes met, she smiled at him, not with sympathy, but with partnership. A silent acknowledgement that she saw both his struggle and his strength. He returned the smile with one of his own, and in that exchange was a depth of connection that their perfect relationship had never achieved. After their guests departed, they cleaned up together in comfortable silence until Theo spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said about adjusting our plans." "Oh?" Olivia looked up from loading the dishwasher. "I still want all those things we talked about, the house with the big yard, the family. But I don't want to wait until we know how this condition will progress." "That could be waiting forever." Olivia straightened, studying his face. "What are you suggesting?" "That we start living for now, not for some hypothetical future where either everything is fine or everything falls apart." He took a deep breath. "I think we should start looking for that house. And maybe start thinking about when we might want to try for a baby." Olivia felt tears spring to her eyes, not from sadness, but from a rush of love so intense it was almost overwhelming. This wasn't the careful, cautious Theo she'd known for years. This was a new version of him, one who had faced his greatest fear and emerged determined to live fully despite it. "Are you sure?" she asked. "No," he admitted with a small laugh. "I'm terrified, but I'm more afraid of missing out on life with you, because I was too scared to embrace it with all its uncertainties." Olivia crossed the kitchen and wrapped her arms around him, their foreheads touching. "Then let's be terrified together," she whispered. "And let's build something real." Beyond perfect. 3 years after their wedding night revelation, Olivia stood in the doorway of their home's sunlit nursery, watching as Theo gently rocked their 6-month-old daughter, Eleanor. His movements were deliberate. Wagner's syndrome had progressed enough to affect his fine motor skills, making tasks like buttoning shirts or typing difficult on bad days. But he had adapted, finding new ways to accomplish what mattered most. "Is she finally asleep?" Olivia whispered. Theo nodded, carefully rising from the rocking chair. He had good days and bad days now. Today had been mostly good. A morning physical therapy session had helped with the stiffness in his right leg, and the new medication seemed to be reducing the frequency of his tremors. As they tiptoed out of the nursery, Olivia's phone buzzed with a message from Naomi. "Coffee tomorrow? Need to hear how you're doing. It's been too long." Olivia smiled at the message, remembering how Naomi had once envied her seemingly perfect relationship with Theo. If only she had known then what Olivia understood now. That perfection was a facade, and true intimacy grew in the cracks and vulnerabilities they allowed each other to see. Later that evening, after dinner, they sat on the porch swing of the craftsman-style house they had purchased 2 years ago. It wasn't the large, pristine home they had once imagined, but its single-story layout and wide doorways were practical adaptations to the possibility that Theo might eventually need mobility aids. "I saw Dr. Westfield today," Theo said, his arm around Olivia's shoulders. "He's cautiously optimistic about that clinical trial. Says my progression pattern might make me a good candidate." Olivia leaned into him. "That's encouraging. When would it start?" "Not for 6 months if I'm accepted. And no guarantees, of course." He kissed the top of her head. "But it's something." They had learned to live with uncertainty, to find hope without demanding guarantees. Each milestone, Buying the house, deciding to have a child, Olivia's recent partnership at her firm, had been approached with eyes wide open to both possibilities and limitations. "Remember our first anniversary?" Olivia asked suddenly. "When we went back to that honeymoon suite?" Theo chuckled. "How could I forget? We spent half the weekend arguing about whether I should use the cane in public. And you were so stubborn about it." "Pot, kettle," he teased. "You were equally determined to make me use it." Olivia smiled at the memory. "We've gotten better at the hard conversations." "We've had plenty of practice," Theo acknowledged. Then, more seriously, "Do you ever regret it? Staying that night, knowing what you were signing up for?" Olivia turned to face him fully. "That's still the wrong question, Theo. I didn't stay despite your condition. I continued building a life with the man I love, a man who happens to have Wagner's syndrome. There's a difference." Inside the house, Eleanor's cry came through the baby monitor. Theo started to rise, but Olivia placed a hand on his arm. "I'll go." "You rest." "My leg's fine tonight," he insisted. "Let me." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. This was their constant balance, knowing when to help and when to step back, when to acknowledge limitations and when to push through them. As she watched him walk carefully back into the house, Olivia reflected on the journey of their relationship. What had begun as a picture-perfect love story had evolved into something far more complex and genuine. They no longer received envious comments about how easy they made marriage look. Instead, friends often remarked on their resilience, their teamwork, their authentic connection. Eleanor's cries subsided, and through the monitor, Olivia heard Theo's voice singing softly, the lullaby they had created together during late-night feedings when his hands were too unsteady to hold a book. This wasn't the life they had once envisioned. It was harder in many ways, punctuated by medical appointments and occasional setbacks. There were days of frustration, moments of grief for what might have been. But woven through it all was a depth of love and understanding that their former perfect relationship had never approached. From the nursery, Theo's voice continued, slightly off-key but unwavering. Olivia closed her eyes and listened, knowing with absolute certainty that this imperfect, challenging, beautiful reality was far more precious than any golden facade they had once presented to the world. Some days were difficult. Some days were joyful. All of them were real. And in that reality, not despite it but because of it, they had found a love that truly deserved to be envied.